this hearing will come to order. First of all, I'd like to thank all the witnesses for your very thoughtful testimony. I've read it, and just appreciate you taking the time to be so thoughtful. Want to thank all the people attending this what I consider very important hearing. I do have a written opening statement that, without objection, I'd like to enter in the record. Hearing none, so ordered. The subject of this hearing is complex. That really made an impression on me as I was reading the testimony. I come from a manufacturing background. This, to me, is the definition of a real problem. There are no easy solutions. So the attempt of this hearing is really trying to, in a very honest, very forthright way, lay out the problem and what we need to do to try and grapple with the problem. Let me say, to me, the problem starts with the fact that we do not have secure borders. We have not had secure borders for decades, and that creates the second problem, which is more the subject of the hearing today. And as a result of those borders that are not secure, we have literally we've almost enticed people to come into this country illegally. Now we've got a population estimate somewhere between 11 and 12 million people in this country illegally. That's a problem. That's not good for them. That's not good for this country. That's not good for our national security, for public health and safety, and it certainly does not promote a functioning legal immigration system. So the purpose of this hearing, I think, is laid out just in the title. Deferred action on immigration, implications and unanswered questions. What I'd really like to explore is, obviously, President Obama has now a couple times, through executive action, through memorandums published, deferred action first on childhood admissions, and now he's deferring action on parents of American citizens and other legal permanent residents. The question I have, and I think it's a legitimate question, is are those executive actions, are those going to help the problem, or is it going to exacerbate the problem? Is it going to make it worse? And I think that's a legitimate question to ask. I think we have some history which we'll be exploring. Our witnesses, and I will introduce you before you testify, but we have the Chief Actuary of Social Security to talk about the effects on our Social Security system. We have an expert on tax compliance and tax fraud, which I think will be interesting to hear the effects of the executive actions in that situation. We have a former official of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and also and he's a commissioner of the Customs and Border Protection, to find out, is that agency going to be able to cope with the increased number of applications and people seeking this legal status. We have an official with the National Border Patrol Council, basically the union of Customs and Border Patrol agents, and we have a former general counsel of the Department of Homeland Security's predecessor organization, the Immigration Naturalization Services Agency. And again, I think there's going to be some very thoughtful testimony, and I'm looking forward to it. Here's my main concern. If we can put up a chart that we've prepared here, we've seen the results of deferred action in the past. And I think it's relatively stark. We had unaccompanied children coming across the border historically, but the numbers were actually declining until basically 2012, when President Obama issued the first series, or his agencies, or his members of his administration issued memos on deferred action on childhood admissions. And I think, just pictorially, graphically, it's pretty stark what the result was. We had a flooding of unaccompanied children to our border, creating that humanitarian crisis. And even though those memorandums did not apply to people coming into this country at that time, that didn't make any difference. And if you take a look at the bottom line there that's in yellow, that's showing the percentage of those unaccompanied children that were actually removed from this country, actually sent back to their countries of origin. You can see how that's declined from 21.4 and 21.7% in 2009, 2010 to only 2.2% in the last year, 2014. So I think this is certainly evidence, and it's my concern that President Obama's deferred action now in this latest round of memorandum could create that same dynamic, actually increase the incentives for illegal immigration, no matter what the memorandums say, actually create the incentives for more people to come into this country illegally, increase the pressure on the border. And again, I think that's a legitimate question to ask. Now, I'd like to conclude my comments by acknowledging the fact that we are a nation of immigrants. We always have been. It has made our nation strong and vibrant. The vast majority of people coming into this country as immigrants, whether legally or illegally, are doing the same for the same reason that our ancestors came here. They are seeking the opportunity, the hope, the promise of this great nation. So I understand that, and we need to value their contributions. But we have to recognize there are literally hundreds of millions, if not a billion or more people that would like to become American citizens, that would like to come to this country. We have to make that a legal process. We have to control that. We have to make sure that what immigration we do allow in this country is done for the benefit of all Americans. And so it's got to be a legal system. So again, I'm looking forward to the testimony. I'm looking for a very thoughtful discussion. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our ranking member, Senator Carper, for his opening comments.
Thanks very much, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Carper. I think Mrs. Carper, by the way, is voicing the concerns of most Americans. We all share the same goal. We want a prosperous country. We want a safe and secure nation, which is why, we have the mission of this committee is to enhance the economic and national security of America. And so, again, I appreciate your comments. I don't believe there's anybody serving in the United States Congress that doesn't want to keep this nation safe and secure. We want to make sure that the department is going to be funded. It's one of the reasons that a number of our leaders, including myself, did ask President Obama not to initiate this executive action, which so many of us do disagree with. That's what's created this issue. Without those actions, DHS would have been funded through the end of the fiscal year, and we'd be talking about funding for the next fiscal year. So it's unfortunate. We're going to have to grapple with this, and I think the best way to do it is what we're doing here today is let's have an honest discussion, and let's talk about what the intended and unintended consequences of that action would be. It is the tradition of this committee to swear in witnesses, so if you could all rise. Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Witnesses are sworn in. We will begin testimony with Mr. Stephen Goss. He has been the Chief Actuary for the Social Security Administration since 2001 and has worked in the Office of the Chief Actuary for over 40 years. Mr. Goss. Mr. Cooper, I'll start out the round of 7 minutes of questioning. Mr. Goss, I just want to make sure I understand the assumptions that you certainly made in your actuarial assessments here. You do assume that we have the border secure and that there's interior enforcement as we would have achieved under the Senate Comprehensive Immigration Bill, correct?
Well, to a degree, we have assumed actually about half as much effectiveness on the border security as we were for S-744. Only half. There are certain features that were built into 744 that we're not aware would be part of what is going on. So,
but you assume greater border security than we have right now?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that's not the case because we have not passed a border security bill, which, by the way, that is a top priority. This committee is finally passed. Give the American people what they've been demanding, a border security and immigration enforcement bill. That'd be handy. Mr. Connor, another assumption, I want both of you to speak to this, is this, supposedly all these people that are currently here and living in the shadows and like they're all in the underground economy, all of a sudden they come into the formal economy and now they start paying taxes. I mean, isn't it really the case that, and I don't know where we get the number on this, but how many do you think, what percentage actually are either paying tax through ITINs or actually with false Social Security numbers?
I don't know the numbers, and I don't know whether the IRS actually has the numbers either, because it tells the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration that it doesn't identify the legal status of people who file returns using ITINs. There are a large number, however, of returns that are filed using false Social Security numbers. Sometimes those are used as a vehicle for theft from the Treasury generally. Sometimes they're used just because the person wants to get get a job and use a Social Security number for that and files a return using it, and it ends up not matching the Social Security Administration's records.
I mean, do you think they're kind of overestimating the number of people that really are in this underground economy that are all of a sudden going to start paying taxes, that they probably already are paying taxes?
I'm not an economist, so I don't have the ability to analyze that data, but that's certainly my impression. I'm a big consumer of economic reports, and that's certainly my impression. Millions of tax returns are filed every year using ITINs.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Belacchi, I want to talk a little bit about potential document fraud. How prevalent is it? How easy is it? What kind of shortcuts are you concerned might be made because of this onslaught, this surge of applications are going to have to be handled by UCIS?
Well, it's going to be hard to tell how much fraud there is in DACA, since I mentioned that, as I understand it, FDNS, the USCIS Anti-Fraud Office, is not involved in document review for those cases at all. However, even if they were, the evidentiary standard for meeting DACA requirements is quite low. And I alluded to one, even the formal instructions on the application say, well, we need some proof of identity. Well, you have a passport. Well, if you don't have a passport, how about a driver's license? If you don't have that, well, we'll just take anything with a photo on it. And as I alluded to before, there's emails by management that say, don't turn anyone away from biometric checks because you don't have their identity. So.
Do you have any doubt that legal immigrants that are looking to apply for different benefits through UCIS, that their applications will be put to the back burner, that some of those folks will be harmed as UCIS redeploys assets to try and take care of the surge?
Yes, indeed. In fact, I think they already have. So, as I mentioned, EADs are not being produced fast enough before people's employment authorization expires. And that's just with DACA, which had about 700,000 applications over 2 years. DAPA applications will start coming in, or expanded DACA will start coming in later this month. And by May, there may be millions of applications for DAPA, which will probably knock out a lot of the other kind of applications.
And again, in your testimony, you said there's about 18,000 total employees now. The UCIS handling about 6 million applications a year.
That's correct.
Now we're going to add 1,000 to process. Nobody really knows, but probably millions. Correct.
Correct.
Real quick, Mr. Goss, why would the administration be issuing permanent Social Security cards for a temporary deferred action program? And what are the implications of those permanent Social Security cards?
I really couldn't speak to the motivation of the administration on that, but our assumptions are that once people are granted this authority, as long as they are re-upped every 3 years and the executive actions stay in force, that they will be able to maintain the status. And with the SSNs that they have been provided, much as the SSNs provided to people who have temporary visas for work or education, and get those re-upped or even overstay those visas, those SSNs stay with them.
Ms. O'Connor, do you have an opinion on that in terms of why they would do that and what implication that might carry?
I find it completely perplexing. I have no explanation.
Okay. Mr. Moran, can you describe to me the basic burden of proof Customs and Border Patrol agents have when they encounter an illegal immigrant in terms of just asking them? Are there magic words that immigrants are basically trained to say to get a certain adjudication or get better treatment?
Sorry about that. I think illegal aliens that we encounter know our authority. They know the loopholes that they can exploit. And just recently, the surge we saw in South Texas, we had people that we had apprehended that had scripts on them where they would recite it and say that they claim credible fear.
So that's the magic word. Currently, you claim credible fear, and then what happens?
Eventually, they will most likely be released. As your chart showed, we're removing approximately 2.5% of them. So their end goal of what they wanted, which was to come to America, is now fulfilled at taxpayer expense.
Have you been given training in terms of how you're going to handle illegal immigrants now with the DAPA?
Yes, sir, we have. There's going to be an additional layer of checks. There's a checklist, and we will now be screening people to see if they qualify for DACA or DAPA.
Will the magic words now be, I've been here, I've been a permanent resident for more than 5 years? And then will that imply, lack of action?
I
that tie
believe
your
it will
hands?
be. I think the claims will be made. I don't know if Border Patrol agents or CBP officers will be the ones that are then adjudicating whether or not a document is authentic and whether they qualify under this program. But that is a concern we have.
What will you do as Border Patrol agent when an illegal immigrant says, no, I've been here, 6 or 7 years? What exactly, how will that affect your actions?
Well, Senator, we have a checklist, and it's pretty simple, and it's a yes or no checklist. And sorry, I have to find here. It says, has he or she resided continuously in the United States since January 1st, 2010? If we check yes, I don't know if that means they qualify. Personally, I don't feel it's my decision to make. I think somebody above my pay
But I mean,
grade needs to
will
make that decision.
you just let them go?
Personally, I would not. I would put that decision on one of my supervisors.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator Carper. Thank you, Senator Ayotte. I've just got a couple other questions. And again, just to quick bring balance to some of the comments made, we would not be discussing DHS funding today had President Obama not taken the unilateral executive action. We would have probably passed an omnibus through the end of this fiscal year. So that's the reason DHS funding is up in the air at this point in time. And again, just yesterday, the way to address this DHS funding would actually be to put a bill on the floor and open it up to debate. We were denied cloture on that, not Republicans. That was basically Democrats just decided not to allow us to proceed to debate on the bill. I'm not quite sure why, but that's just a fact. Mr. Goss, I've got a actuarial note that you issued in April of 2013 to kind of answer the question that I was asking Ms. O'Connor about how many of the immigrant population, what percent is actually in the underground economy. Back then, you were saying about 3.9 million of 8.3 million, so less than half were actually in the underground economy. More than half then actually were paying into the system in some way, shape, or form, either with a illegal Social Security number or through the ITIN. Is that about what your estimates were in this current?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
It's actually a little bit higher than that at this point because back at our estimates, back at the time of 2009 and 2010, we still had a significant number of people in the undocumented population who had prior to 2001, when things were really tightened up about being able to get issued an SSN after birth. Prior to that time, people could come in with perhaps not legitimate documentation and relatively easily get an SSN. After a specific time of 2001 that we all too well remember, especially Senator Booker, that has been tightened up, and we see a much diminished number of people getting SSNs illegitimately.
So there are more people or less people in the underground economy versus 2013?
We would say a larger share of the workers who are in the undocumented population now are in the underground economy.
Okay.
And if I might just add on that one little thing, since you all are so important in terms of tax policy, one of the biggest issues I would hope that you all would pay attention to would be the fact that, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis of the Department of Commerce, 1/2 of all of the compensation to independent contractors and self-employed individuals in this country is not reported for tax purposes. Now, that's obviously not all from undocumented individuals, but there's an awful lot of non-reporting
Right.
of income, and that would make a big difference if all of that income was reported for payroll taxes to Social Security and Medicare as well as.
But again, that's kind of beside the issue.
That's a different thing.
Okay. So I do want to explore the assumptions and the estimates in terms of this being a boon to our GDP. Now, I certainly understand, because I come from the private sector, that the way, what makes up an economy is human capital combined with the financial capital, and that's what drives an economy. So you need, when you increase the supply of human capital, through bursts and through immigration, that will increase the size of GDP. What puzzles me about the estimates coming out of here is we've already got this population of 11 to 12 million people in this country illegally. They're working either, many of them are working either in the above ground or underground economy. So I don't know what this temporary deferred action, how that all of a sudden causes this surge in economic activity. It just really makes no sense to me whatsoever. Mr. Goss.
Thank you very much. Excellent question. Actually, the component of the very, very small extra increase of only about 0.15% increase in the level of GDP in 2024 relatively little of that is from the DACA-DAPA. The only extent to which it is because of those is because we assume that once people gain this status, they will be less likely to leave the population. If they remain in the population, as you indicate, they'll be part of our population and our base for employment. The biggest share of that really is the other net flows, the entrepreneurs coming in, by 2024.
But again, that should occur through a legal process, and there's no denying that. If we have more entrepreneurs coming through legal immigration process.
Exactly.
If we get the bright, and by the way, I'm supportive of that, if we get the smartest minds in the world, we want them here in America. If we educate them, we want them to stay to produce those innovations and grow our economy. But again, that's a legal immigration system versus an illegal one, which creates all kinds of problems from the standpoint of national security, public health and safety. And again, it's a broken immigration system, which I'm all for fixing. But my final comment is, until we secure the border, it's never going to be perfect, but until we do a better job, and I think Americans are way ahead of us, the public's way ahead of the political process here in terms of wondering why we haven't done that. Until we do that, any part of our immigration law, tax law, that creates an incentive for illegal immigration, I would say DAPA and DACA have created that incentive. As long as we create those incentives for illegal immigration, we'll have more of it. It'll create higher pressure on the border, give Mr. Moran and his compatriots real fits, make their job far more difficult. So this is really, from my standpoint, and the top priority of this committee is to craft an effective and a workable border security bill combined with an immigration enforcement bill that really does take a look at our current immigration laws and try to eliminate or at least drastically reduce the incentives for illegal immigration, because as long as those incentives remain and we haven't secured the border, it's going to be right back to 1986. I mean, you can do whatever you want to do to grant amnesty or take executive action, but as long as we have those incentives in place and we don't have a secure border, we're just going to make the problem worse. But with that, that kind of concludes my participation. Senator Carper.
Good.